Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. So the topic today is what's new in finance. My name is Henrik, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Microsoft Teams. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. So when you join this event, your name, your email address may be viewable by session organizers. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. If you do not consent to be part of recorded sessions, please disconnect your line at this time. The recording will be made available in the Tech Talk section of our Community Dynamics page. If you have questions for our presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. If you wish your name not to be visible to organizers or session participants, please post your questions anonymously. We'll be responding to your questions throughout the session, and if we have time, in a live segment at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your participation, for your patience and participation during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Veselina, Eric, Suarbh, Satya, and myself, Henrik, from the FastTrack Solution Architect team. Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Henrik. And welcome, everyone. Appreciate you joining today. The agenda today is to talk about some best practices for new features, and then talk about several features that are either new or compelling, or getting to the point where we think they are something you should be strongly considering. Next slide, please. So the best practices are pretty straightforward, but make sure you read the documentation that's available for new features. Enable the feature in a sandbox that has recent production data, and validate the feature and the related business processes in that sandbox before enabling it in production. Next slide, please. On the available documentation, there's a way to add feedback on the article. If the documentation is lacking in some way, add feedback to the article itself. That's the quickest way and the easiest way. If you need more than that, open a support case if the documentation is missing, or if you feel like a support case is a better option. And for finance, I put my email. I'm happy to give some advice on the above, because we want the documentation to be useful and improved. So, feedback is very important. Next slide, please, Henrik. Okay, so the first feature I'm going to talk about is the performance enhancement for general ledger dimension set balance calculation. It's a lot of words. So we just generally call it balances V2. Next slide, please. So the balances V2 feature was originally released in February of 2024, which was a while ago, 2 years ago now. And just for context, the dimension set balances are a summary of the GL data that is optimized to support the trial balance list page. It allows the trial balance list page to load generally in a few seconds, whereas coming from the actual GL data, it would take longer than that. Next slide, please. So the pros for this balances V2 feature are that it's just generally more efficient from top to bottom. There's a new data model that improves performance, and it reduces the storage. And the data model is just less complex. And like I said, it uses less space. It is self-contained in that it does not rely on the dimension framework at all. So all the data is stored right in the balances tables. And when you enable this feature, there's a cleanup job that will remove data from the dimension tables that was related to the V1 balances, and that will save you space. Dimension attribute value combination is one table that has all the combinations for dimension sets, and that can be a majority of the data in that table. So that data will get removed. A little bit more on that later. And then the other great thing about Balances v2 is that there's less administration. All the legal entities are updated by a single process automation batch job. You don't have to do anything. On the Balances v1 on Balances v1, it would update the balances when you loaded the trial balance, but if there was a gap between from the last time you loaded it, it could take a while. So sometimes you'd have a batch job to keep the balances, like, every hour update them to make sure they were close. And those batch jobs, you needed to have one for every legal entity and every dimension set combination. So, people just generally didn't have that many of them. But if you needed some, there was a lot of administration, at least potentially. Next slide, please. So the cons and this is an area where I think we need to improve on, was that the big con was that the update frequency for that batch job could not be set less than 5 minutes. And that basically meant that the trial balance could be up to 5 minutes behind live data. And we found out that not surprisingly, that's not really acceptable at month end or year end. It's probably okay other times of the year, but especially at period end, having to wait 5 minutes to see an entry show up on the trial balance was not acceptable. And even worse, the documentation for Balances v2, there's a whole article just for the new balances, it's called, did not mention that. So I think that's a key point, and being transparent like that is something that we're definitely working on. The other con was that with a brand new data model, potentially some customizations would need to be updated, maybe somewhat significantly, but at least the article did mention the customizations part of it. Okay, next slide, please. So the recent improvements for Balances v2, and it was in the what's new for, I think, maybe 47 probably, is that there is a real-time update. There's a update balance option or update balances option added to the trial balance. It was in 45 and 46 quality update, and I think it was in the probably even the preview for 47. And picture is just a little bit, it's sort of off on the right side of the trial balance page. There's an update balances. There's no feature. The Balances v2 needs to be update or enabled. As long as that's enabled, you'll see this update balances. And in my environment, I had my balance update set to less than 5 minutes. So you can see it's 7 minutes. And then if I just click that update, it'll launch a small batch job for just this legal entity and this dimension set. And it usually just completes in a minute or two. So then your balances would be current. And this was 100% based on customer feedback, and we appreciate that. Yep. And 2 more things that are coming. One is that we found that it wasn't particularly, the Balances v2 update process wasn't particularly efficient if you had a lot of companies or ledgers that didn't have any transactions. So I'm just double checking. I got everything. Yeah. And the other thing is that we're going to work on the next bottleneck for some cases is that improved combination processing is planned, probably be some sort of parallel processing to make that go faster. But in general, it's very efficient and it works well. Next slide. A few notes. The Balances v2 feature should not be disabled until the original cleanup is complete. That's because those cleaning up of those dimension tables, it needs to be done Oh, and I'm sorry, I had the wrong notes here, but this is the skipping the ledgers with no new transactions improvement and parallel processing for combinations. I was in the wrong section before. And I think that is all the thing. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or we can talk about them later. And the next slide, please, is some docs articles. And with that, I'll hand it over to Satya to talk about the account reconciliation agent. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So we're going to talk about the account reconciliation agent. So the account reconciliation agent represents a transformative step towards continuous financial closure and offers significant benefits to the customers. With it, what we do is we shift away from a reactive approach that relies, if you're aware of, mostly on the SSRS reports for reconciliation. In place of that approach, we've introduced a proactive experience. The innovative account reconciliation workspace raises exceptions and uses an intelligent agent to evaluate those exceptions and provide recommended actions. So today in this tech talk, we're going to talk about the new enhancements that we have made to the agent in our 10.0.46 release. So here we are in the new version, we are focusing mostly on closing functional gaps and streamlining exception handling. With that, we are supporting agentic capabilities for the in-ledger and not in sub-ledger exceptions, and also in sub-ledger and not in ledger exception. The enhancements are centered around creating journal entries for voucher amount mismatches. Like if you used the previous version of the agent, we would see the voucher amount mismatches. Now we can create journal entries for the mismatch amounts. And also enhancements are around reversing. So expanding the intelligent matching is also one of the enhancements that we're going to talk about. So these improvements are specifically impactful for high volume, high complexity reconciliations that you had to previously do outside of the finance and operations, but now you can directly do on the workspace and using the agent. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So here, the first enhancement that we have done is creating journal entry. So the journal entry directly, you can create it directly from the reconciliation exception. Like on the workspace, we show the exception of voucher amount mismatch. From there, whatever is the mismatch between the sub-ledger and the ledger, you can go ahead and create a journal entry directly. And earlier, we have to navigate between the reconciliation workspace and the general ledger pages, but now you can do it in the same place where you see your exception. So this improves accuracy and avoids manual data entry. And with this new enhancement, we bring in the amount that needs to be adjusted, the credit debit amount, the currency, the date, the account, the control account. In this scenario where there is a mismatch between the sub-ledger and the ledger, the user can review all the information, click OK, and there's a journal link that is showed, and then you can go ahead and click on the link of the journal that is created and go ahead and post it. So here again, the benefits are we are reducing manual entry, so back and forth between the exception and the journal entry, trying to figure out what the amounts are and what the right accounts are, and also we have the traceability for audit purposes. The second enhancement here is the reversal flow enhancement. So it improves how the users, say for example, for the control account, we see that happening mostly during the month-end closure or the year-end closures, where the control accounts are open for manual entries, and there are some transactions or journal that are posted for these control accounts where they should not have been posted. That is to reconcile the books where the subledger and the ledgers are not matching. So this happens very often where an incorrect journal has been posted, and then we have to reconcile that with the subledger. So now we have the option to reverse a transaction. So this is reversal, like if you're aware of how transactions are reversed in each of the modules. So this is the same. Now The workspace, which shows the exception, you go into the exception. The agent would suggest reversal if a transaction has been directly posted for a control account in the general ledger, and the reversal option is, the agent figures it out and suggests the user to reverse the transaction, and the user can now go ahead and reverse this transaction that was directly posted for this control account. And so again, it avoids going back and forth, trying to reconcile which account, and also like going to a different page for posting these reversals. The third enhancement that we have in the latest release, as I've stated, that the agent now supports exception handling or recommendations for exceptions of type in ledger but not in subledger, and also in subledger but not in ledger. So the agent provides options to match multiple transactions for exceptions between the subledger and the ledger for the same account. So the user can now manually reconcile these transactions, like try to view what transactions are there in the subledger and what are the transactions in this ledger, multiple transactions, and go ahead and match these transactions to reconcile the exception. So the agent suggests different options here, like as you can see on the screen, which best fit or closer to the exception amount, and the user can select the option suggested by the agent, or the user can also go ahead and manually try to reconcile different transactions between the subledger and the ledger. So this is one area that we're continuously trying to improve, the intelligent matching, but we do have this out in the latest release, where the user gets options for all the subledger transactions and the ledger transactions that are available to be reconciled for the same account. So we do have the resources available for the new features that are here, and also a general tech talk around the agent. With that, I'll pass it over to Saurabh.
Yeah, thank you, Satya. So now let's talk about the next feature, which is about Account Source Explorer Advanced File Export. So if you move to the next one. So this is a new capability which has been introduced in version 45. So it's been a while. So something that finance team have been asking for a long time. So this feature enables a multi-company export directly from the Account Source Explorer with just one action, and the accountant can export the ledger data from multiple legal entities into a single Excel file. And why is this important? In most month-end process, the cross-company scenarios, the accountants have to keep switching between companies to export data one entity at a time, and then manually stitching the everything together into an Excel. This new export completely removes that friction, and it not only saves significant time, but also gives finance team a clean, unified data set that they can immediately analyze. And when combine this Excel tool like a pivot and pivot tables, it becomes a more powerful for doing the deeper analysis for the cross-company insights. A few key highlights on this is it supports the multiple legal entities, ensure all the data is from the same fiscal period for consistency, and produce a ready-to-use Excel data set designed for consolidated analysis. So overall, it's a simple feature with a big impact on speed, accuracy, and efficiency for financial reporting. There is a MS Loan link on this page where the entire functionality has been explained, so you can navigate there. But let's see in the next slide that how it works. So for that, you need to first enable the feature in the feature management. You should have, if you are on version 46, it should be available by default for you. And then you navigate to the journal ledger where to the Account Source Explorer under Inquiries and Reports, where you would be on the screen where you can select the option of export. And that is where you will click on multi-ledger export, and you will select the period for which you would like to export the data. And then you have an option of selecting the legal entities which you want. And with this one action, the system exports the multi-company ledger data and ready for the analysis and the report to the Excel. So that's how this feature works. So now let's move to the next feature, which we have for today to talk about. And that's very exciting one, which we have for Analytics MCP, which is also we call it as a BPA MCP. So if you move to the next one. So let's now talk about how we enable agentic intelligence on top of Dynamics 365 using the BPA Business Performance Analytics. At the foundation, BPA transforms raw ERP transactions into trusted, dimensional, and context-rich analytical models across finance, supply chain, and different areas. And this is critical because the agents are not only as effective as the quality and consistency of the data they reason over. What makes this truly agentic is the ERP Analytics MCP server. Using the model context protocol, agents can discover BPA model, understand the measures and the relationships, and execute the analytical queries, all while respecting the row-level securities and the existing ERP permissions which you have. And on top of the foundation, we can unlock the multiple experiences. For example, the Copilot assisted analysis through the M365 Copilot, user-led exploration into the Excel and the Power BI, and increasingly autonomous agent that can continuously analyze R2R, procure to pay, and the order to cash processes. Now, if you move to the next one, this slide shows how ERP Analytics MCP unlocks insight by bringing the agentic intelligence directly to the BPA. So we talked about that the foundation, we have a BPA who turns the raw ERP transaction into the dimension model. On top of that, we have this ERP analytics server, which exposes this governed data to agents in a consistent and secure way. Then agents can discover schemas and understand those measures and the relationships. And importantly, this works across multiple tools, which I just now said that you can have M365 agent, the Copilot Studio. You can utilize this MCP into Microsoft Foundry or the VS Code. But let's see in the next slide what is available today as part of this MCP. So on this, you are seeing the two core tools that are that power agentic analytics with BPA today. The first is the GAT BPA dataset schema. This allows an agent to understand the analytical model, the table structure, tables, measure, dimensions, and the relationship that makes up BPA, and think of it as giving the agent a map of trust and finance grade data, not a raw transaction. And the second tool which you have as part of this MCP is the execute tax queries. This is where the intelligence comes live. The agent dynamically generates and execute tax queries based on the user intent, like which has been asked in the chat in the agent, without users needing to know the tax at all. And critically, with raw the security automatically it enforces, like if you based on the user has the access or the permission to the data. Together, these tools enables a powerful shift from pre-built dashboard to conversational, contextual, and the secure analytics. Whether it's a Copilot assisted analysis or Excel or autonomous agent monitoring different data sets, all insights are grounded into the same governed BPA model. So this is how Dynamics 365 moves from reporting on a business to reasoning about the business safely, consistently, and at a scale. So yeah, we can move to the next one. So here we have some additional resources. We also have done a full tech talk on this PPA MCP, which is in the preview, but there are other resources which are available on your screen. You can go through that and explore this in the detail. So thank you for this, and then now I hand over to Henrik, the next one.
Thank you, Saurabh. So the next area that we're going to talk about is going to be fixed assets and asset leasing on what has been released in recent updates. So if we look at fixed assets first, I'm kind of one of the, I would say, much anticipated, certainly by a number of customers that I've talked to, feature is around being able to split and transfer fixed assets between legal entities. So what this does is that it allows fixed assets, either a full asset or part of an asset, to be transferred to another legal entity. And that is either by transferring the sources, kind of the source assets acquisition price and accumulated depreciations, or simply by transferring the assets net book value. One thing to be very aware of in this is that this is in preview, and it's in preview in a form where you cannot just go to the feature management and turn it on or enable it. You will actually have to reach out to Microsoft support to have this feature enabled. So that is something to keep in mind, and also just think about what that means in terms of the environments that you enable this in. That it is very much preview and not a general availability, generally available release. The next thing is related to the split and transfer fixed assets, and that is that there is a new data entity that supports the transfer between legal entities. And this is to allow that you can programmatically, through code, manage the asset transfer between legal entities by importing the required data. And of course, as it's related to that, is also in preview. And then finally, I guess you can say it's a small thing, but actually, I would say it's something that I've heard quite a few times, that when you set up a fixed asset, you go through your procurement process, and then actually when you post the accounts payable invoice, the name of the fixed asset is overwritten by whatever comes from the invoice. So with this feature, retain fixed asset name when acquiring through accounts payable invoice, when this is disabled, the standard feature that you've been used to will be present, where the fixed asset name can be overwritten by the invoice. However, if you enable this, the fixed asset name will not be overwritten. Rather, it's the value from the invoice will be updated in the field information 3 on the fixed asset record, and that's under the technical information. So you are now able to set up a fixed asset, give it the name that you need it in accordance to kind of your internal rules, and then still capture the information that comes through from the invoice. If we then move on to asset leasing, first of all, there is a new workflow introduced for the lease impairment process. And together with that, to support the process, there's also a new lease impairment page where I'm kind of, you go through the process, you go through the workflow, and when the workflow has been approved, you can then continue the processing of your impairment from this new lease impairment page. Another, you might say, small thing, but something that I know is quite helpful, is that you can now specify with the asset leasing journal description feature, you can, when that's enabled, you can prevent Dynamics from posting fixed asset or from posting asset leasing journals without a description. And kind of that is key to many people to be able to control that. And then finally, on the leasing features, it is now possible to, it's called lease termination triggers fixed asset posting. So when you enable this, when a lease is terminated, Dynamics will automatically kind of create the posting of the lease termination transactions in the fixed asset subledger. So rather than kind of having to terminate the lease and then go and do the subledger transactions, this is now in one process triggered by the lease termination. If you want to dive into more of these, you will find under the additional resources here the general information on fixed assets and asset leasing, and there is a specific article on the fixed asset intercompany split and transfer, the preview that I mentioned, that you can dive into to get further information on this if that is functionality that could really help you. So moving on to subscription billing, where we have a few also smaller things. So generally, I'm kind of around cost of goods sold adjustments, so that when there is a what do you call it? An inventory closing that can update your cost. This is now being reflected through subscription billing, and that could be both subscription billing for sales and it can be subscription billing for projects. And that was released in 10.0.45. And then generally there has been a lot of focus on performance improvements. So generating invoices with sales order. A lot of focus has been on reducing the chattiness between the client between Dynamics and the database. The deferral recognition batch, which is in preview, is also there because of due to performance improvements, and then finally improvements to the deferral process, all three were introduced in 10.0.46. So those were the subscription billing, and if I just show you the additional resources, so there is, apologies, the general subscription billing overview. There's an article on the performance improvements, and then not least, we now have a Viva Engage group regarding subscription billing, which is under accounts receivable. So do sign up for that Viva Engage group if this is an area that you are working in. Okay, and then awareness between ledger settlement and year-end close. A few things that has been added. So first of all, we have in 10.0.44, we had a new feature for reviewing missing settlement accounts. And what this does is that it displays the main accounts that has been used for ledger settlement in the selected fiscal year, but have since been removed from the setup. And the reason why this is important is that if it's been removed from the setup, you cannot bring up the settlements in the form here. So if you had these out of balance, for example, in the reporting currency, if there was an exchange rate difference, had this out of balance error when you were doing your year-end close, it was really difficult to pinpoint which accounts those transactions could originate from. So with this feature, it is much easier to go in and say, these are the accounts I need to go and add to my setup in order to be able to correct my out of balance challenges when I'm doing my year-end close. So this is going to help a lot when you are having these situations and not using the automatic exchange rate gain loss postings in your reporting currency when doing ledger settlement. The next one is more around kind of having an audit trail. So the field's description and reason is the the reason you can give when you're actually doing the settlement manually in the form. These two fields are now part of the grid. So it's a really good way of seeing kind of, it's good to see that if you have actually put in a reason for why this settlement was done, it could be correcting something, it could be, whatever, then you will actually see it in the grid and you can filter on it, and makes it easier to work with your ledger settlements. And then, of course, the description. So this is the transaction description that will come through, which is also very helpful. And this also was, the previous one was 10.0.44. This was introduced in 10.0.45. One thing I do want to just add in terms of this, because this is a feature that is not as well used as I would certainly say that it should be. So if you're not clear on what is the awareness between ledger settlement and year-end close, it is a feature that is there to ensure that the two processes of ledger settlement and year-end close, that they operate consistently and accurately, when you're actually, so that you're not having a lot of manual tasks to do when you're doing your year-end close. And the key features that you'll find that has been introduced through this is that settled transactions are excluded from opening balances. So that means it's no longer just taking the sum of transactions and moving over to the new year. You have the option to transfer detailed opening balances at year-end close. So this means that rather than doing settlement across 2 fiscal years, the unsettled transaction can be moved over. Rather than a lump sum opening balance, it can be detailed transactions, so that you're in the new fiscal year, you can perform your ledger settlements. We can also handle automatic posting of exchange rate differences in reporting currency when you do ledger settlements. And last but not least, you can set up auto settlement rules for automatic settlement of your ledger transactions. So shameless plug. If you want to know more about this, there are 2 tech talks. One is about getting started with awareness between ledger settlement and year-end close, and that is an introduction to the features and recommendations on how to configure it. And then there's the second one. The follow-up is around adopting these features and the lessons learned, and that is very much guidance on how to adopt the awareness features in an already transacting legal entity, as there can be some challenges, like, for example, the ledger settlements across fiscal years, which can cause some challenges for the year-end close. So if you are, I can only recommend that you look into this, to these features around awareness between ledger settlement and year-end close. And if you are interested in learning how to set it up and how to adopt it in an already transacting company, I strongly recommend that you have a look at the 2 tech talks that has been posted. And then, of course, we have just links to learn articles. When we post this, you will be able to click on the links to get to these articles for both our awareness feature and also the automatic ledger settlements. Okay. And with that, we have reached the question section. I don't know if we have any questions we want to.
Yeah, Henrik.
Yeah.
One question is, does ledger settlements help on intercompany transactions to reconcile intercompany accounts?
So I would say the short answer is yes, but you will have to do the ledger settlement in both legal entities. But being able to the ledger settlement will allow you to be able to say that, or to justify that this is the balance and is made up of these transactions. So yes, that is certainly one use case for ledger settlements, intercompany transactions.
Thank you. I think that is the only other. I think that there was a question about whether MCP server developed for data from Fabric Link, if there will also be a MCP server developed for data from Fabric Link that also has knowledge of finance and operations, and the response is to stay tuned for news on that feature. So we'll smile a little, and that's it. Thank you. That's all the questions, unless some more come in. Could give a couple minutes to see if anybody else has a question.
So,
oh, there's a couple more here. In the account reconciliation agent, when will the bank, intercompany, and fixed asset reconciliation features be released?
So we do have that in the plans, like supporting different areas, so inventory and fixed asset. So we don't have the timelines yet, but they are in the works.
Thank you.
But bank is already part of the current version.
Bank is already part of the intercompany. The account reconciliation agent.
Okay. In asset leasing, are there plans to automate posting across books similar to fixed assets?
Good question. I'll have to look into that and respond. It's not something I'm aware of.
Okay. Very good. That was from Nathan. So if you want to get a hold of us, Nathan, we can get you the answer. Give it just a minute here, and then if there's nothing else, guess we can wrap it up.
So I see that there is one on ledger settlement. Is the ledger settlement home screen to give overview of status of all ledger settlements across the balance sheet? So no, there isn't. Ledger settlement is by main account. But actually, I would recommend that you possibly create an idea for this, because I think that you will not be the only one asking for this.
I think these are all okay. I think we're all caught up then. So,
okay.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'll give it to you, Henrik.
Thank you, Eric. We have posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We would love to hear your feedback on today's session and hear what you would like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be made available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page in the coming weeks. I would like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and the audience who joined us today. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.